this in a long time. Even the football started, they had this many people a couple of months ago. So I'm glad everybody braved the rain. Usually people don't brave the rain and come down here for anything. And it's a pretty bad night, but thanks for coming. And if you're new, we have newsletters over here. It was the last newsletter, that yellow one, and all these fat ones are free too. Take a newsletter and with new information. Please pay your dues if you're a member and you haven't paid your dues yet. It's $30 for a single, $35 for a family. And if you want to join, there's an application in the back of the newsletter. The society plans to use some of the dues and donation funds to insulate the ceiling of this building, which had never had insulation in it. It used to be an old country store. And that might help us on our electric bills. And also the back porch. Store building.
I think that's
Building
that's flash.
on the left,
That's
which was
flash.
completed last year. Needs a sign, and we're going to get one by Tour Time, and it's a Beech Island country store. And Ben Thrift, who lives down the road, made and donated the society 2 benches to put in front of the store. And we're still looking for an old SO gas pump. Upcoming, we're having the 14th annual Historic Beech Island tour. And last year's tour brochures are over there. And South Slope, which is Dr. Cook and Jonathan Miller's house. And you can look at this, some pictures of it. It's on Lamar Drive. It's the house we have so far, and we also have
yeah, I don't fight.
My five is there. I had been bed late to know.
this is Vicki Scott. She on Catherwood.
Oh.
And I don't know if she was at the meeting last week, but I don't know if everybody knew or not. And we hope to have Catherwood on our tour one day. You'll have to look at that brochure about the house we're going to. Okay, I'm going to read some stuff here. Introduce the speaker. Hey, I've known Kenny Jarrett for a long time. I wrote a story on him and his Uncle Gerald Brown years and years back in the 70s when I was working for the newspaper. And Kenny was just a teenager then. And we're featuring Aiken County's on Kenny Jarrett, who manufactures the world's most accurate hunting rifle at his workshop in Jackson. Kenny Jarrett is a Jackson native, grew up on a farm, joined the Marine Corps, was injured during training for elite reconnaissance, returned to the county, began entering marksman competition, eventually becoming world champion sharpshooter with 17 world records for bench rest marksmanship. He also acquired the 10,000-acre cow plantation, which fronts the Savannah River, where he began making his own accurate rifles because he wasn't satisfied with the rifles store sold. It's a longer story available in Field and Stream and other magazine stories. He's also built a museum inspired by his family and by his own love of history. A museum that's open to the public, a portion of which may be seen in photographs we're going to show in a minute. The Native American artifacts, and there's quite a range, were for the most part found by him and are locally made and used. They also include rarely found objects. His museum also includes an intriguing range of Civil War and Civil War era artifacts acquired by him and that illustrate his love of history. Juxtaposed against that are Jarrett's big game trophies that he shot in Africa and elsewhere. And about each of one of them is an interesting story. Open to the public on Sundays, his museum is well designed and intriguing. So, you got any questions? What?
Kenny said he was at the
Oh, Oh, I forgot the invocation, but you can go ahead and do that, I'm ready for you anyway.
Jackie, before we begin, I don't know if you announced this or not, but next month on March, we're going to have Paul Culler from Silver Bluff. I don't know if you mentioned that or not.
Yeah, next month is Paul Keller from Silver Bluff, and he's retiring in June, and we've been working with Paul for years and years and years.
Yeah, and we'll be doing
We're gonna
really
miss him,
interesting
yeah.
program with him.
We're going to also have a cake because it's the 35th anniversary of the Historical Society, and Paul's going away cake too, so.
Okay.
Make sure you come get your cake.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you with humble hearts because as I look around at this crowd, I'm looking at people, Lord, that are here honoring the people that came before them. And Lord, we're thankful for our health and our lives to be here tonight to lift them up. Lord, I'm in a lot of cemeteries and I see people that once they're gone and buried, no flowers, no nothing. And that makes me very sad. But Lord, I thank you for these folks. I thank you for this organization and the opportunity that we have to look back on things before us. Supposedly that's to help us see what the future holds. I thank you for everybody here tonight. I thank you for all our blessings, Lord. And I ask you to bless our visit in a special way. In your name, amen. Amen.
Also, I forgot to say, Kenny and I are distant cousins from both Lyons.
You should have quit, Jackie.
All right. Are you going to stand?
Well, I just I want to thank these fine men, Daniel and his son, George and George. They're not quite like George Foreman, the boxer. I wonder if he'd have had 5 sons and they'd all been. He's got one George. This is a very bright young man, and I've enjoyed visiting with him yesterday some as we put this together. Now, I want to tell y'all, this ain't the Kenny Jarrett show now. George kind of made it look that way, but in reality, what it's about is a piece of property that the Lord trusted me with in my lifetime, and that's the way I look at it. I don't look at it as an owner. I look at it as God gives us these gifts and trusts us with them for our lifetime, hopefully. The only time it comes in reality that it's my property is at tax time. Taxes at Calvin is a little over $500. So we have to do something, and we evolved a hunting program a long time ago to offset that. We continue to farm. I farmed all my life. But we have tried to take care of the land. We try to preserve what God's given us. Like the Boy Scout creed, you're supposed to leave things better than you found them. If there was no firewood when you got to a campsite, you cut firewood and left a pile for the next person, that type of thing. So that's kind of the mindset that was instilled in me by my uncle. And some of the things we do, we've been managing for quality deer. I have learned an awful lot about whitetail deer on the property. And a lot of what the biologists tell you is not the way it really is. And we finally found out the things that really work. Number one ingredients keep people from killing them until they get big enough. That's the number. The other thing is to feed them things, because the natural soil content in our area does not have the minerals and the trace minerals and elements to make antlers big. And so we have subsidized that with pellets and different other ways that we artificially feed the deer. We can actually worm deer on our face if we want to. So we've done that. My uncle passed away in 1992, and he had no children. And he and my grandmother raised me and my sister. We were 2 weeks away from going in an orphan home. My dad was a terrible drunk. He wasn't when he went to World War II, but when he came back out, just based on what my mama told me before she died, that he smoked 3 packs of Camels a day and drank all the liquor he could get his hands on. It finally killed him somewhere out in Texas when he was 44. So the natural gravitation for me was to latch on to my uncle as my fatherly image, and my grandmother, because my mama was in Augusta working all the time, and we just saw her on Saturday night. And then Monday morning she was gone again. So, but it was good. It was good because God works in mysterious ways, folks, and he put me with some of the best people I've ever been, having occasionally, dedicated Christian people that live their lives by biblical precepts. And they beat me in the head with that, about being honest, about telling the truth. That's what made our product, the Jarrett rifle, world renowned, because I don't make something that I want to shoot myself. And I tell everybody, he says, what about your guns? And I said, let me tell you, when you get it with my name on it, you got your check waiting on it. I've taken 2 back in 41 years. Both of them involved in divorce. The guy was scared his wife was going to get him. Been at that picture show too, so I sympathize with the poor guy. But anyway, another thing, we had to cut a tremendous amount of timber off of Calvin when my uncle passed away by the most unfair thing that we have, and I hope President Trump will amend it some kind of way, is inheritance tax. Now, some of the land on Calvin, when I went to work there, was able to work effectively. We finished paying for 2 tracts of land in the swamp that didn't count for anything. So when he died, you got to pay an appraisal. Appraisal on a place that size is about $28,000 to $30,000 to come tell you what everything's worth, so the government can nail you to the cross. And the bottom line was, we got through with all that, I owed the government $1.2 million. To give you 4 months to pay. Well, what we all know, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I cut timber, and I got a real good forester that I was led to. I got a real good tax guy in Columbia. And about the time that was happening, I had a marriage that was falling apart. And on top of that, I had 1,000 acres of land that joined us that my uncle wanted so bad. But he and the guy, Mr. Donald Penn, didn't get along. Every time they'd look at each other, the hair would stand up on their head like 2 porcupines. But he liked me. And so I went through a rigmarole to get that piece of property tied up, which is worth probably at least 5 times what I paid for it. It's some of the best farmland in South Carolina. The only place I've ever seen in South Carolina where we made 300 bushels of corn today 4 years ago. That was irrigated. But that's pretty impressive. Then you say yields like that, you're talking about somewhere in Iowa or somewhere way off. But we'll average, on an average year dry land corn, we'll make right at 200 bushels. You got to do that to make any money. But anyway, I cut all this timber, and I'm going too slow, but I cut all this timber when I started planting it back. And I planted 1,000 acres of planted pines. My youngest son was pretty small, and I went to Madison, Georgia, and bought a used tree planter from them, and I put him back there in that thing, and you bend over all day long in that box, setting them trees. It's a killing job for a grown man, especially a good sized person. And anyway, we planted, and then Dan Conley, I hired him to help plant us some. And then the swamp that had old torn up trees, we got a forester in there, and we come and he said, this is a mess, that everybody's logged here, Kenny, through the years has high graded this timber. They come in and took the nice straight big trees and then felling them, split the tops and everything on the rest. Said, you ain't got nothing but a pile of junk here. And I said, well, what we gonna do? He said, cut it, we'll put wood, and let's start over. I said, man, I don't know about starting over. You know, you get to thinking about how long you're gonna live. But I went ahead and did it, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I wasn't really pleased with it, and it looked like a bomb run out there. But that place today is one of the prettiest hardwood stands there. Every stem out there is straight as an arrow. I've got cherry bark oaks like that would have never happened if I hadn't had the leadership of a man that really knew what he was doing. So we have been putting back, we've been working on roads. We have put out over 8,000 tons of gravel on the roads. There's 165 miles of roads there. And if it ain't that, it's a beaver got a pipe stopped up somewhere. We don't have but one bridge left on the property because they were a nuisance to keep up with also. But that's what we're doing about preserving conservation, and the shooting straight thing, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
So just to introduce myself, I am George McDaniel. I'm a contractor, a historian contractor with Audubon, South Carolina. And just briefly say historian, I took my undergraduate degree in history from Davidson College, and then did grad school and master's degree at University of Mississippi. And so you can stand up there, that might work better. So what I'm gonna do, this is a kind of easy job for me. I've got some slides that we're gonna go through and let Kenny sort of talk about at greater length the things that he just touched on, particularly sort of his life, growing up here in Jackson, and then also Cowden Plantation, Jarrett Rifles, and then with the main idea being, what can we do, I don't live here, but people in this area to think with a conservation ethos. That's one of the things with Audubon, is how do we preserve what is here, the natural resources and the historical resources. And so Kenny's gonna talk about that, because he's done such a wonderful job doing that. So, first of all...
Excuse me, Joey.
Yes.
Jackie, is there a way that we can cut these lights? I want to get these
Yeah,
photos.
turn that light off down there, somebody thread those.
Okay. I want to get the photographs, but I can't. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Try and see how
That
dark
one.
it is, turn this one off.
Is that too dark? That's okay.
It's a little too dark.
That's,
Up to y'all.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
That's good.
This is where I grew up, and of course it was painted white back then, but this was originally a Methodist church that was built in Jackson. You can see it tomorrow, it's right next door to the town hall. And I grew up right there, and I remember one time my grandmama and I was swinging in that swing there, and the link that went in the eye broke. Me and her went backwards out in the yard, and she was pretty old at the time, and I thought it hurt her, but it didn't. But she played the organ there when she was a little girl, and they were Methodist at the time, and the pews were in the bottom, and the top was actually open then. It was later changed to a rooming house for DuPont workers in the early 50s. But anyway, I think it was the Greens and the Foremans and somebody else were feuding with each other. And they got to arguing in the church before the service about whatever their disagreement was. And there was a guy that was friends to both of them, and so he decided he would just jump up and jerk his coat open and say, y'all want to shoot somebody, shoot me. 3 of them did before he could sit down.
Wow.
Bullet holes all around that door there. My grandmama told me about it, and there's still bullet holes in that door, because back in those days, people didn't call the cops. They took the law in their own hands, and they would shoot you too. But anyway, it was pretty tough in the wintertime, no insulation. I slept with my grandmother till I was about 12 years old, and many a time I've got up and the glass of water by the bed was frozen. So what she would do when I was small, she'd put me in the bed and have me lay the way she wanted me to lay. I had to get up and pee at night, but if I had, I'd have to be in the bed because I was trapped. But anyway, we survived. We were a wonderful cook, bless her heart.
Excuse me, can we turn off this light here, because I'd like to see the picture of us. You can't see really. Is that okay?
I would just let it be that.
You want to try and maybe unscrew a couple bolts?
Okay, see if you can. Somebody, because he's describing pictures hard to see.
So it's probably not very hot.
There you go. And on the other side too, where they're pointing towards the picture.
All right, getting
Those
dark
might not
in
be
here,
called
y'all.
that.
Okay, there you go.
Like a woman, man, gonna really keep it.
There we go. That's good. That's about. Thank you.
All right.
That's about.
And this was my uncle, who I loved absolutely to death. That was me about a month ago. That's my oldest son, he's 44 now. And my uncle was the mayor of Jackson for, I think, 3 terms. He was the judge out there and in the little magistrate's court. And he really did a good job with anything he did. He was a very humble guy. With all that land and everything, I've seen him sitting on the old store that we had down there, that the people that worked on the farm would come and buy things, and he was sewing the sole back on a pair of Red Wing boots with a sack needle and copper wire. But that's the kind of guy he was. But he taught me those values. He taught me to be humble and understand that what you have in this life don't mean anything. On Judgment Day, what you've given away is what's going to make a difference. And that was his philosophy, totally, and honesty to a fault. It was never anything on his truck radio or some kind of religious station. This is one of his stepdaughters, his youngest stepdaughter with her first child. And this was about 3 years before he passed away with pancreatic cancer. And he helped a lot of young people in Jackson that were troubled and went out of their way to try to through the cops to make sure that they were watched after and didn't get out of line again. He and I went to Aiken one day to the bank. We come back, and right there in the center of where the town hall is now was grammar school. That's where I went to grammar school. There's cop cars everywhere and lights flashing and a bus sitting there and kids out there with blood on them. And my uncle said, well, what in the world happened? I said, I don't know. And so we pulled up there, and there'd been a shooting right there at that intersection. Well, ain't an intersection, where you pull out of town hall now. And this guy came by, and he was looking for my uncle, and I guess I would have been in the mix too because we were together. He was gonna kill my uncle because he had beaten his wife. And the third time he did it, my uncle locked him up in Aiken jail. And he had a vendetta that he was gonna kill him. So we drove into all this, and what happened is he came through that stop right there, and Chief Bentley, Chief of Police, was sitting there, and he stuck the pistol out the window at Chief Bentley, and Chief Bentley shot at him, and all of a sudden the car just took off. So Chief Bentley assumed that he'd missed him. Went up the road about 300 yards, and Castle's, right there where Joe Castle's shop was, it's a big old tank with pillars, and he ran off the road and hit one of those pillars. Well, they ran up there to arrest him, and Chief Bentley had shot him right through the left eye. And he had a half a quart of some kind of vodka in his seat. So that could have been a little bad event for he and I both. But if you trust in the Lord and look out for what His plans are in your life, He's gonna look out for you. And He sure looked out for us that day.
Well, speaking of giving back, you've got this museum. This is an exterior shot of your museum. And then here's the plaque. And so Gerald Brown was the uncle that you were just talking about. And then Mamie Brown was your grandmother who you slept in the bed?
Right.
Right. So they inspired a love of history and
Well, we didn't have a TV till I was 14, and it was about big rounds of serving, a little bit bigger than a paper plate, and fuzzy all the time. My uncle bought it at the Goodyear store in Aiken, and I'd never been around any TV. We thought that was pretty exciting that we had one, but anyway, before then, growing up, my grandmama would tell me stories of her father who fought, my great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War. And she had a fantastic memory, and she would tell me, reiterate all these stories around the fire at night with his 7 other children about where he was and what he saw and what happened and all. Those people back then, farmers and such, they didn't travel, so they knew where Virginia and Washington was and Richmond and all like that, but they had no hopes of ever getting there. And so she found it terribly interesting. Then that sparked a little interest, and then I would go to study hall in school, and I would read about guns and read about hunting all over the world, and my favorite magazine was National Geographic. And so that is where the plan. And then being on that farm all my life, getting to shoot, and shoot a lot, between birds and everything else. And the fishing, it was just a perfect storm in my life to wind up doing what I do. Well, she was an inspiration. This is my great-grandmother.
no great-grandparents.
And she is the direct descendant of Michael Meyer. And that picture was in my grandmama's bedroom. And I was terrified of it as a small child. I thought it was a ghost in that picture. And she worked for Mr. and Miss Hankerson down what we call Jackson Road now, and they had in the basement of that house, that's where Jimmy Joe Foreman, y'all remember where Jimmy Joe used to live? And that is one of the oldest houses in Jackson. But anyway, she worked down there as a seamstress, and mostly what they did was make these white uniforms for the black women that would have these special things at church and all. Well, my grandmama said she would be so sick, that she would have to lay down by the path 2 or 3 times. And she started getting my grandmama to go with her. And they didn't know it, but she was dying of female cancer. And she didn't last long after that. My grandmama said she was as sweet as she could be, but she sure did look sweet.
Well, here's just some artifacts that sort of shows the people who may not have been to your museum what's on the inside. So this is a photograph of a Native American cooking bowl, circa 600 AD. So where did you find this bowl? And then also what types of things would it have been used for?
That was probably a cook bowl. If you look down on the bottom, you see those burnt spots, which means it sat on a fire. Now I've got another one that's about twice that big that I'm satisfied was a gathering bowl when they were gathering roots or nuts or the things they found in.
And then here we have, these are some arrowheads you see, and this is just a small portion of your collection. And then could you tell us what, we have these stones down here on the bottom. What do you think, what were those used for?
They're mostly, the bigger ones are milling stones where they would mill after agriculture was advent in the late woodland era. But before then, they would crush up the meal out of hickory nuts. They ate a lot of white oak acorns. Well, acorns have tannic acid in them. So they would put them in a wicker basket and go down to flowing water and slosh it back and forth. And then they would use it kind of like we use meal, really, I think. And they would mix it with turtle. The Indians on my place ate a whole lot of freshwater clams. I know one spot that you can take a potato rake and just break out clods of freshwater clams. And it's right on a high point, right out in the swamp. And so these stones were instrumental in the domestic survival of the Indian. How long did it take me to gather the collection?
Yeah.
63 years.
Okay. So we have, has anyone been to the Jarrett Museum? We have some people that have been? Yeah, good, okay, wonderful. So this is a Civil War cannon that's on display there. Just tell us a little bit about what type of cannon that is, and then just a little bit about the shells that we see in the back.
The cannon is a 5-inch, what they call a mountain howitzer. And this was a popular cannon because it could be disassembled and put on 2 mules and transported. So a lot of the cavalry, like Jeb Stuart and people like that, had this type of, that was the only artillery that they had. And the signs, I think, got it hid, but it shot something called grape shot, and it was a round piece of metal with the balls in it, and they would load that thing and shoot it, and it was nothing but a giant shotgun. The balls were about that big, and if it hit a guy, it might kill 2 or 3 of them. Or what happened a lot at Gettysburg, they would knock the hoof off of a mule or horse, and it'd go through a guy's head. So it'd clean out a spot if you were being attacked by infantry. And I got the sign, explains it all, shows how it was attached to the mules, and on the very left part, facing the green there, is the only 300-pound parrot shell in existence that was fired from a gun that was firing on Fort Sumter. The gun shot 27 times, it blew up in 27th shot. It carried 19 pounds of powder inside of the shell, black powder, and it was 20-odd pounds to propel it. Weighed 300 pounds, it was good for 10,000 yards. One of those took the whole south wall out for one shot. Now, the reason there weren't any of them, because they all hit something solid, and they had a concussion plunger fuse, we call it, on the end. When that hit and it mashed, it actually detonated a little shotgun cap, and that's what set it on fire and made it blow up. This one evidently missed it, and it went into water. And in 1948, they were dredging around Sullivan's Island and all down through there. They picked it up in a dredge tube, and the tube was stopped up, so they unbolted it and threw it out in the marsh. A friend of mine, in 2015, he has made a living hunting artillery shells down around Sullivan. We had a going joke because we knew they didn't exist. And every time I seen him, I said, "Man, you found me a 300 parrot yet?" He laughed. He said, "Yeah, you was, you know. Don't want to shop it." And so I went to the Charleston show 2014. And he was sitting by the lady that was selling the tickets to get in. He said, "Kenny," he said, "you want that 300-pound parrot?" I said, "Yeah, man, I still want it." I said, "I'll take a couple of them you got." He's joking. He said, "I got one." And he had a serious look on his face. And that was it. He told me that he'd gotten the powder out of it. Well, I drilled a bunch of those up there. The top row is 100, a short and a long 100-pound, 50-pound parrot, 20-pounders, 10-pounders, shinkles, all kind of shells. Most of these on this side are Confederate shells. But anyway, he said, "You gonna drill that thing?" Well, I had drilled 2 or 3. And boy, when you put it in water and you drill it with a carbide bit, and when you break through to the inside, the pressure has built up from that black powder, and it'll go like that and spray water in your face, and you got to have a pretty stiff set of bowels not to measure. Well, or pucker ring, I'd say. But anyway, a friend of mine was drilling some down in Savannah. He had bought about a dozen from some young boys that found a cache of them somewhere. And the 5th one that he drilled, it blew up and blew a part of his head off. Hit his grandson in the throat, and they were in the hospital forever, but he got over it. Well, that spooked me enough right there. 8 months later, a guy right outside of Richmond was drilling an artillery mortar round, a big giant 13-inch mortar round. And he hadn't even drilled yet. He had a wire brush cleaning the scale and stuff off, and the fuse is pewter on most of them. Some of them brass, but a spark went through where that old pewter fuse, and he cleaned out about a half an acre. They got that guy up with a yard rake. A woman a block and a half down the street was standing at the kitchen table washing dishes, and a piece of it came through the roof and fell on the counter by her. So he was the last person killed in the Civil War. Needless to say, I paid the man I bought it from to drill that thing. And he told me that he got all the powder out of it. He didn't get all the powder out of it. I rigged up a little old long copper tube on a dental pit, and we got powder out of that thing for 2 days. And then I piled it up in a pile on a piece of plywood I had it laying on, and I said, "I bet that stuff won't burn." Well, it didn't explode, but it was a while before I had eyebrows and eyes. That thing went like that, and I thought it would burn my eyes out or something, but I learned better than that too, so, you know. Sometimes you get to do some stupid stuff. These shackles right here, go ahead.
No, I'll let you.
These shackles were found by a friend of mine in Savannah, and I bought them from him, and they came from Ebenezer Creek. Now, what happened in Ebenezer Creek was, General Sherman had 3 lines of troops, and they were about 20-25 miles apart, in parallel, going towards Savannah. Well, these people accumulated a tremendous amount of black slaves that wanted to be free, and they thought that this guy was the Messiah, and he was going to carry all of them to Mount Lincoln. That's what they said, Mount Lincoln. So it accumulated, and all of his troops were living off the land, and they would send scavengers out and take people's hogs and chickens and everything they had to feed that many people. It was a big crowd, folks. The main wagon train was 26 miles long. So they got to Ebenezer Creek with all these slaves, and some of them had probably caused problems. This is an original slave shack. It was found there. And Sherman pulled a good little trick there. He put down a pontoon bridge across Ebenezer Creek, which is wider than this building, and got all this stuff across. He instructed his men, when my last guy goes across, run to the other end and start jerking the pontoons up. Well, these black people couldn't swim. The majority of them couldn't swim, and were scared to death of alligators, so they wouldn't swim as kids. They were scared to death of snakes. So they didn't know what to do. So they jumped in Ebenezer Creek by the thousands to try to keep off. And they said when Ebenezer Creek went into the river, it was actually clogged up for 800 yards with dead black people. You ain't never read that in the book, have you?
Yeah.
It's Black History Week. Let's throw that in there too. He was a real nice guy. He was the kind of guy that would catch a husband off at war, big plantation house, drag her out, take every last morsel of food she had, build a big bonfire in the yard, throw all her clothes and little girls, strip them all buck naked, throw the baby dolls in the fire, and sleet and rain and drive off and leave. You ain't never read about that either. History has got to be any good, it's got to be visually seen by somebody. History at best, ladies and gentlemen, is conjectural, it's opinion. You remember the little deal in school where we sat in a circle and the teacher would tell this child something and it would go all the way around, and when it got back next to her, it was all screwed up. Well, history's that way. I'll give you one example. The history of Gettysburg has been written by over 30 people. Not a single one of them was at that battle. So, you know, unless you get an authoritative facts, documentation from something, you need to be kind of skeptical of it. These slave tags proved to me what I read about what he did to those black folks at Ebenezer Creek. And, you know, that wasn't the only set he found 8 sets. All right.
So Jarrett rifles. Here we have, this is from your website, the world's most accurate hunting rifles. And I believe you answered this in your intro. You started 41 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And then if you could just describe what makes it the world's most accurate hunting rifle. You don't have to give away trade secrets, but.
Well, one thing, George, is the only piece of that gun we buy is the scope, obviously, and the trigger. All the mechanics of that gun, the barrel, the receiver, the stock, everything's made by us. The only way you're gonna make a quality product whether it's a lawnmower or a gun or cement mixer. You've got to have control of the quality of the parts that go in it. The other thing that I always did from day one is we shoot every rifle we make. We send the guy 20 rounds with it. We send him an irrevocable guarantee for 30 days. If he's not pleased with it, we'll take it back, like I mentioned earlier. So that's why, and my youngest son makes rifle barrels right now, and he laps those things into tolerance within 1/10 of 1,000. Now y'all are not machinists, but I'll tell you what that is. If you could nano slice that piece of paper into 40 pieces, and you took one of those 40 pieces, that's the deviation in our rifle barrels from one end to the other. We've made them known all over the world. I can't go to an airport in Frankfurt, Germany, or anywhere that people don't come up, especially if I got a Jarrett rifle hat. And the last couple of years, I've learned better about that. But,
Is that your youngest son, Kane, there on the?
yeah, he's a barrel maker. Jay on the left is, he's a stocker and production manager. My daughter was in office.
And then, due to that, you have some famous customers. Here we have Hank Williams Jr. on the left, and then General Norman Schwarzkopf on the right. And I know those aren't the only two you said there's some others.
Yes, sir. You got General Chuck Yeager, who's a good friend of mine, and you know that name. He's the guy that broke the sound barrier for the first time. And General Walt Boomer, who was head of all the Marines in the Gulf War, he and General Schwarzkopf were the two that you saw on TV every night while that original Gulf War was going on. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was a good friend. He and I hunted and fished together. One of the best, sincerest friends I ever had. I think it was because I knew his daddy. I was racing old junk cars up in Columbia, and his daddy, Ralph, would come up there. And if Ralph showed up with a car, you were going to get dusted that night, I can tell you that. And then Sawyer Brown, the singer, Davey Allison, Richard Childress, RCR Racing, Hank Williams Jr., President George Bush, Travis Tritt, the Rothschild family banking firm in England, Pete Kendall, you got this snap-down flooring, Pete's in Salzburg, Austria. His family has been in the timber business for 300 years. And his company developed this pop town flooring that you can, and great guy. He invited me there several years ago, and I got lost in his house. And after about 10 minutes, I just stopped and went to hollering. And finally somebody showed up. He had 2 rooms there that you could play a NBA basketball game, and I don't know what he was doing. Scared to ask.
Well, finally, we're going to turn to Cowden. So here's a picture of.
Well, I ain't through with all these.
Oh my!
Bobby Richardson, tossed the greatest second baseman, played for the New York Yankees. The only guy in the history of professional baseball that ever won the most valuable player on the losing team. He and I hunted together in Utah and made him a gun. Skipper Jones was a great Braves player. Dakota Watson, who's still playing football, Terrence Zinacki. He and I deer hunted a couple times, a great guy. Rich Grisham, who was a original outdoor rider, wore old funny hat. I have personally shot 6 world records, and then there's 5 more world records that were shot by people that were shooting guns that came from Jackson, South Carolina. We also have 14 world records of bigger than ever, bigger than any animals that were killed. And we got Tyler Tanny and Garrett Hilbert. Y'all know what that is? You ever heard of these guys? I had him 3 months ago. They've got something I bet George knows called Dude Perfect on the internet. And they're mainly on YouTube and they're everywhere. And they do all kind of crazy stunts. 250 million followers. And they bought some guns from us to do some trick shooting with, so we interested to see what that's gonna evolve. The Bianchi Cup, the long range pistol event, we won it with guns we made 3 times. So, we've been there and done that. I won a 1,000-yard match at Lackland Air Force Base 25 years ago. Went by to watch a guy shoot, he had one of my guns, and it was a 3-man team, it wasn't nobody but he and his son. So I shot his gun, and they add your targets together, and the winning team gets a prize. Okay.
All right. So this is,
I'll take this, you're getting hot in here, y'all.
so this is a map of Cowden Plantation. And you can see Georgia there on the left, the Savannah River. And then you were telling me right before we started that Talamanca Road was so important and ran from Fort Moore and right diagonally through your property, is that correct?
Talamanca Road actually runs right through here, right down through here, straight to the river. The way you can see it so well up here on this place, this is Penn Farm, is this humped up, this raised up where the, where the road was built, probably turned up with turn plows with mules and just kept it that way. But if you read a lot about history in our area, you will hear a lot about Talamanca Road. If you read a bunch of James Hammond stuff, you will read a lot about Talamanca Road.
And speaking of Hammond, we have, this is Gray's Landing, and so Hammond owned both Silver Bluff, which Audubon owns now, and then also owned what is now Cowden, and might have been called Lower Bluff at the time. But Gray's Landing, essentially, just why is it so significant? Why was it important to Hammond?
It's where he shipped most of his commodities to the coast. He experimented with growing rice on the thin farm I told you about I bought from the guy. We took old maps, y'all, and looked at where his people had put the ditches in, because this is low lying. Water flows to big water. So the drainage for Jackson and the surrounding area comes right through that place. So dealing with the water to get use out of the good land, you have to do something with it. We farmed the strips in between.
And these are some of the ditches.
Yes, sir.
And you said that you used his map, and then y'all redug the ditch.
Yeah, so that little ladder looking thing across there is where the irrigation unit goes across.
Okay.
But what he did with these ditches is he had a gate on each end, it's kind of like a rice gate. And if it got real dry, he would stop them up and let that water, because that water's real fluffy, I mean, it don't ever get hard. And he would let the water transfer to the crop, which was pretty smart back in 1850.
And speaking of, we have a photograph here of 2 African American men who worked on Cowden at different points. And the one on the left is Herbert Chavis, who we had Barney Chavis, the Super Bowl champion, so I assume there's a relationship there. I've got to figure out what that is. But if you could just tell us a little bit about these 2 men.
Herbert on the left was a farmer, and the patriarch, or you might say the David biblically corresponding to all the Chavises that surround it. And we used to go to singing together, and it's a funny story about that, but I'll skip that. That's a little off color. But anyway, the guy on the right, his name was Governor Washington, and he lived up towards Catwood, and he would come and just help us weigh cotton and all. Even back then, he wasn't able to do a whole lot, and he chewed tobacco like I do, and he would spit on you if you didn't. Not intentionally, but it was going everywhere. He didn't have no teeth, you know, so. But anyway, he was a good person. His wife was my nanny, and once a week she would come to Grandmama's house, and the first thing she wanted to know was where I was at, and I'd run jump up in her lap, and she would make me pig preserves and pear preserves, and bring fresh shelled little old bitty white peas. I don't even know what you call them. They're about half the size of regular peas, but she'd always bring something every time. So both of these guys, I was around them a lot. I fished on Island Creek with both of them, and I wouldn't get a bite, and they'd be catching fish, and I'm running up and down the bank with a bucket in my hand with my stuff. And whoever told me, he said, "Look, Kenny," he said, "why don't you sit down and fish?" He said, "if you'll fish in one place, you'll catch some fish." He said, "You jump up and leave before the fish know you there." Also, he taught me to spit on a worm.
Well, so we're gonna bring it sort of into the end here, but we have Cowden Plantation, Silver Bluff, also just all around this area. There's just beautiful land and forest. But I'm from Charleston, so I came in yesterday, and I'm staying in Aiken, and then driving down here just yesterday, and then also today. You see things that are changing, and changing quickly. And speaking to someone from Charleston, it was very different than what it is now, and it's why it's so important for places like Silver Bluff, for Cowden Plantation, and everyone to sort of think with this idea of conservation and what is possible, what's going to happen in the future, because it can quickly become this and just become a suburban, just sprawl with cookie cutter houses and just development. And I think just driving down Old Jackson Highway, just off to the left, there's some areas clear cut, and I know Augusta is probably growing, and it's just right there, just across the river, and so just trying to think of that going forward. And so Kenny, I'll just turn it to you. This beautiful picture of you with your grandchildren at Cowden, and if you could just give us some closing thoughts on advice for people to be thinking about as they look towards the future, and how to preserve the resources that have been left and been given in this community, in this area.
All right, I'm gonna tell you first what Cowden means. Several of you asked me what that word means, and I looked it up after the fact of something else, but I'll tell you, in the Old English translation, it means a place where charcoal would burn. And didn't think much about that, but in previous years, my uncle told me about a fellow that lived on the farm there ever since he was a little boy. His name was Palihu. Palihu was Indian and probably African or whatever. My uncle thought he was mostly Indian because he had straight hair. But he would actually make these mounds kind of like a cave, and he would burn charcoal for all the blacksmith shops mostly. because it would get a lot hotter than coal that they had access to. He also rafted logs from my granddaddy, and my granddaddy rafted logs down the Savannah River to Lee Banana Case Company, and they had a big old steam crane that they lifted them out the water. And they would make a kind of a giant canoe-shaped affair and go around the outside logs and drive an eye pin into the log, and they run a cable all the way through, tighten it, and he pushed it with an old outboard motor. I think it was like 15 horsepower. That was, my uncle said the thing was that big. But my uncle said that the greatest adventure when he was a kid is one Friday, my granddaddy let him get on the logs with Pally-Hoo and go down to Lee Banana Case, go down the river. And he had a platform there, and he had a thing that he filled up with sand. He had a fire on there if it was cold and everything. And he said that was really, he described it in detail. Then my granddaddy would pick him up there and get paid for the logs and come back home and bring Pally-Hoo back home. So it means a place where it's charcoal was burned. The advice for me is to pay attention to what we're doing with our country, with our land. I'm gonna tell you the greatest concern I've got right now, and I've farmed all my life, is these solar panels. I can carry you down a place between here and Ridgeland. There must be 600 acres. Well, we're gonna grow our food, folks, if they fill it up. We got plenty of electricity, but nothing to cook. There's got to be some balance there about that. And I'll tell you things that's going on you don't even know about. I have had two guys that come and approach me wanting to buy green tree receipts or green tree reserves on my property. And in that, you give them an agreement that you won't remove but so much timber per year. And the trees is what purifies our air. So that's, leaves, that's what they're after. And he says extremely rich people in Hollywood and all will buy these things because they're deductible. Then here 6 months ago, I had a guy that came, and I have a place on the river that's actually suitable for houses and stuff. And it's a sand back a good ways. It's got 2 sand beaches on it, and I don't know how they do it, but he offered me $1 million for 5 acres. Told me it wasn't for sale. I said, why would you pay that kind of money for 5 acres? He said, I'm gonna sell the sand grants on it. This is stuff that's happening in our country. And I'm not lying about the $1 million, but the land's not for sale, so I'm not interested in that. But I can tell you that things have changed, and we have got to change with them. If you used to go out in your backyard and change your oil and dump it out there in the edge of the woods, don't do that no more. You know what I'm saying? We know, we all smart people, we wouldn't be here tonight if we wasn't. We know what we need to do to preserve our world, and this is our home. We can't do anything about ice melting in Antarctica and all that stuff. And you can't run yourself crazy about that, and you can't prove all that to start with. But we can do something about our home right here and do what's right about contaminating our waterways and preserving things that just best be left alone.
Good, well said.
All that stuff.
Good.
All right, well, thanks. Yes.
I just have one question, going clear back to where you found that bowl, did you call it a burning bowl, or Did you buy that in one piece?
This one's come right back.
That bowl was in 200.
You can cut that on. You can cut that.
Wow.
They can cut that on. They can cut that on
The
there.
boy that I used to dig down there with, I never found one, and he found that one Saturday. And I got a crook of sack, and we put all the pieces, and we dug around to make sure we got all the pieces. And
What was the measurement of the area that you found it?
well, let me back up a minute, okay? I'm gonna straighten you out on this. These Indians traveled, and it was nothing for a tribe here or a group to load up and go to West Virginia. Well, these big old grinding rocks and these bowls and everything they had was heavy as Hades, and they didn't have no morphine. They couldn't tote it with them. So if they left this home place here, they would bury all their domestic utilities here, well marked, and all of them would remember. And then when they got up, let's say to Charlotte, they would go like it, and there was a lot of game and fish there. They would make more pots and bowls and, areas and stuff. And they would live there a while, and they would bury that. And at some point, when they figured they'd gone far enough, they would turn around and retract themselves. This particular site that you're asking about is actually on Steel Creek. And it now belongs to Mr. Billy Morris, who's a friend of mine, but we used to go down there and dig right on the river. And high sandy, and I'll guarantee you it's washed so much that most of the good stuff is in that river. But anyway, there was probably, I know, at least 30 bowls that came out of that one spot. But I have one that came out of that spot that don't have a crack in it.
Wow.
It's this big. But you know why? It was buried upside down. So if it held water. Go right on through town, there's ballparks on your right.
Yes, sir.
All right, when the time you pass them, there's a paved road to your right, and the sign says Jarrett Rifles and all that.
Okay.
Come down that road a mile and a tenth, there's another sign just like that to the left in my driveway.
Okay.
It's at the Jarrett Rifle, it's on Calvin Plantation with Jarrett Rifles, the shops on the site and the museums on the site.
Okay. I've been down there. I've driven out far enough where I got to the sign that says, "Don't go any further."
Yeah. And I have a little sign-up sheet here, if you wouldn't mind those, putting your name and then also an email address so we can stay in touch. Are there any other questions? I know there's some refreshments to be served and such, and we
Yeah, let me just ask one thing. You built the museum, and that's a wonderful museum, but why go to all that trouble? Why did you build a museum?
Because I love it. And I love holding something in my hand that a guy held in his hand 3,000 years ago, a Civil War bullet 160 years ago. He was the last guy to touch it till I found it. That intrigues me.
Well said, yeah, good, good. Yeah, okay.
Well, thank everybody again for coming out
Mm-hmm.
this night. I know the weather wasn't great, but it was a wonderful evening, I think. So, appreciate it once again. Thank you. And thank you, Kenny. And thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie.
Historical Society.
That's right, thank you, Jackie.
Yes.
Yeah. That's gonna be, the tour's April 25th.
Okay.
April 25th?
Saturday night.
Okay, good.
Y'all have the new brochure.
Oh, I forgot to tell you something.
Uh-oh, get it?
You get one of these from last year, Kenny's been waiting.
Podcast.
Okay.
Did you ever try any? Did you ever try?
Yeah, I did, but I was in Bill did somewhere. And it was in a roaster pan, it looked like a little old pig. I said, man, why ain't he getting all? I ate the whole running gear off of that. What is that and how do you cook it? Once they told me the podcast, I forgot about how they cook it.
It might have some porridge.
Does it taste like chicken?
Yeah.
Does it taste like chicken?